Summa Contra Gentiles, First Book on God, by St. Thomas Aquinas, translated by the Fathers of the English Dominican Province. Chapter 21. That God is His own essence. From what has been laid down, we are able to conclude that God is His own essence, quiddity, or nature. In everything that is not its own essence or quiddity, there must needs be some kind of composition. For since each thing contains its own essence, if a thing contained nothing besides its own essence, all that a thing is would be its essence. Therefore, if a thing were not its own essence, there must be something in it besides its essence, and consequently there must be composition therein. For which reason the essence in composite things has the signification of a part, as humanity in a man. Now, it has been shown that in God there is no composition. Therefore, God is His own essence. Again, seemingly, that alone which does not enter into the definition of a thing is beside the essence of that thing. For a definition signifies what a thing is. Now only the accidents of a thing do not enter into its definition, and consequently, only accidents are in a thing besides its essence. But in God there are no accidents, as we shall show further on. Accordingly, there is nothing in Him besides His essence. Therefore, He is His own essence. Moreover, forms that are not predicated of subsistent things, whether the latter be taken universally or singly, are not single per se subsistent forms individualized in themselves. For we do not say that Socrates, or man, or an animal is whiteness, because whiteness is not singly per se subsistent, but is individualized by its subsistent subject. Likewise, natural forms do not per se subsist singly, but are individualized in their respective matters. Wherefore, we do not say that this individual fire, or that fire in general, is its own form. Moreover, the essences or quiddities of genera or species are individualized by the signate matter of this or that individual, although indeed the quiddity of a genus or species includes form and matter in general. Wherefore, we do not say that Socrates, or man, is humanity. Now the divine essence exists per se singly, and is individualized in itself, since it is not in any matter, as shown above. Hence the divine essence is predicated of God, so that we may say, God is His own essence. Further, the essence of a thing is either the thing itself, or is related to it in some way as cause, since a thing derives its species from its essence. But nothing can in any way be a cause of God, for He is the first being, as shown above. Therefore, God is His own essence. Again, that which is not its own essence is related in respect of some part of itself to that essence, as potentiality to act. Wherefore the essence is signified by way of form, for instance, humanity. But there is no potentiality in God, as shown above. Therefore it follows that He is His own essence. Chapter 22. That in God, existence and essence are the same. From what has been shown above, we may go on to prove that in God, essence or quiddity is not distinct from His existence. For it has been shown above that there is a thing which exists of itself necessarily, and this is God. Now necessary existence, if it belongs to a quiddity which is not that existence itself, is either inconsistent with or repugnant to that quiddity, as per se existence is to the quiddity of whiteness, or else is consistent or akin thereto, for instance, that whiteness exists in some other thing. In the former supposition, it will not belong to that quiddity to exist per se necessarily. For instance, it becomes not whiteness to exist per se. In the second hypothesis, either this existence must be dependent on the essence, or both of them on some other cause, or the essence on the existence. The first two are in contradiction with the very notion of necessary per se existence, for if it depend on something else, it no longer exists necessarily. From the third supposition it follows that this quiddity is added accidentally to the thing which exists per se necessarily, because whatever follows on the essence of a thing is accidental thereto. Therefore, God has not an essence distinct from his existence. Against this, however, it might be urged that this existence does not depend absolutely on this essence, and in such a way that it would not be at all unless the essence were, but that it depends as regards the conjunction whereby they are united together. And thus this existence is per se necessary, while the conjunction is not per se necessary. But this answer does not avoid the above impossibility. For if this existence can be understood without this essence, it will follow that this essence is related accidentally to this existence. Now this existence is that which exists per se necessarily. Therefore this essence is related accidentally to that which exists per se necessarily. Therefore it is not its quiddity. But God is that which exists per se necessarily. Therefore this existence is not God's essence, but something subsequent thereto. On the other hand, if this existence cannot be understood apart from this essence, then this existence depends absolutely on that which depends its conjunction with this essence, and thus the same conclusion follows. Further, each thing exists by its own existence. Wherefore that which is not its own existence does not exist per se necessarily. But God exists per se necessarily. Therefore, God is his own existence. Moreover, if God's existence is not his essence, and it cannot be a part of him, since the divine essence is simple as shown above, it follows that this existence is something besides his essence. Now whatever is becoming to a thing besides its essence is becoming to it through some cause. For those things which are not one per se, if they be united together, must needs be united through some cause. Therefore existence is becoming to that quiddity through some cause. Either then, this cause is something essential to that thing, or the essence itself, or else it is some other thing. If the former, and the essence exists according to that existence, it follows that a thing is a cause of its own existence. But this is impossible, because according to the understanding, the cause exists before the effect, and consequently if the thing is the cause of its own existence, it would be understood to exist before having existence, which is impossible. Unless it be understood that a thing is the cause of its own accidental existence, which is a relative existence. For this is not impossible. For we find an accidental being caused by the principles of its subject, before the substantial being of the subject is understood to exist. Now, however, we are speaking not of accidental, but of substantial existence. If, on the other hand, existence be becoming to the essence, by reason of some other cause, then whatever acquires existence from another cause is caused and is not the first cause, whereas God is the first cause, having no cause, as shown above. Wherefore this quiddity that acquires existence elsewhere is not the quiddity of God. Therefore, it is necessary that God's existence be his own quiddity. Moreover, existence denotes a kind of actuality, since a thing is said to exist, not through being in potentiality, but through being in act. Now everything to which an act is becoming, and which is distinct from that act, is related thereto as potentiality to act. since act and potentiality are reciprocal terms. Accordingly, if the divine essence is distinct from its existence, it follows that his essence and existence are mutually related as potentiality and act. Now, it has been proved that in God there is nothing of potentiality, and that he is pure act. Therefore, God's essence is not distinct from his existence. Again, whatsoever cannot exist unless several things concur is composite. Now, no thing in which essence and existence are distinct from one another can exist except several things concur, to wit, its essence and existence. Therefore, every thing in which essence and existence are distinct is composite. But God is not composite, as proved above. Therefore, God's existence is his essence. Further, everything exists through having existence, therefore nothing the essence of which is not its existence exists by its essence, but by participation of something, namely existence. Now that which exists by participation of something cannot be the first being, because that in which a thing participates in order to exist is previous to that thing. But God is the first being to which nothing is previous. Therefore, God's essence is his existence. This sublime truth Moses was taught by the Lord, for when he asked the Lord, in Exodus chapter 3, verses 13 and 14, "If the children of Israel should say to me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" The Lord answered, "I am who am. Thus shalt thou say to the children of Israel, 'He who is hath sent me to you,' thus declaring his own name to be, 'He who is.'" Now every name is appointed to signify the nature or essence of a thing. Wherefore it follows that God's very existence itself is his essence or nature. Moreover, the Catholic doctors have professed this truth, for Hilary says in his On the Trinity, "Existence is not an accident in God, but the subsisting truth, the abiding cause, and the natural property of his essence." And Boethius says in his own On the Trinity that "the divine substance is existence itself, and all other existence proceeds therefrom." Chapter 23. That there is no accident in God. From this truth it follows of necessity that nothing can accrue to God besides his essence, nor anything be accidentally in him. For existence itself cannot participate in something that is not of its essence, although that which exists can participate in something else. Because nothing is more formal or more simple than existence. Hence existence itself can participate in nothing. Now the divine subsistence is existence itself. Therefore, he has nothing that is not of his substance. Therefore, no accident can be in him. Moreover, whatever is in a thing accidentally has a cause of being there, since it is added to the essence of that in which it is. Therefore, if anything is in God accidentally, this must be through some cause. Consequently, the cause of the accident is either the divine substance itself or something else. If it is something else, this other thing must act on the divine substance, since nothing introduces a form, whether substantial or accidental, into some recipient, unless in some way it act upon that recipient. Because to act is nothing but to make something to be actual, and it is this by a form. Wherefore God will be passive and movable to some agent, which is against what has been decided above. If, on the other hand, the divine substance itself is the cause of the accident that is in it, then it is impossible for it to be its cause as receiving it, since then the same thing in the same respect would make itself to be an act. Therefore, If there is an accident in God, it follows that he receives that accident in one respect and causes it in another, even as bodies receive their proper accidents through the nature of their matter and cause them through their form. So that God, therefore, will be composite, the contrary of which has been proved above. Again, every subject of an accident is compared thereto as potentiality to act, because an accident is a kind of form making a thing to exist actually according to accidental existence. But there is no potentiality in God, as shown above. Therefore, there can be no accident in him. Moreover, everything in which something is accidentally is in some way changeable as to its nature, since an accident by its very nature may be in a thing or not in it. Therefore, if God has something that becomes him accidentally, it follows that he is changeable, the contrary of which has been proved above. Further, everything that has an accident in itself is not whatever it has in itself, because an accident is not of the essence of its subject. But God is whatever he has in himself. Therefore, no accident is in God. The middle proposition is proved as follows. A thing is always to be found more excellently in the cause than in the effect. But God is the cause of all things. Therefore, whatever is in him is found in him in the most perfect way. Now that which is most perfectly becoming to a thing is that thing itself, because it is more perfectly one than when one thing is united to another substantially, as form is united to matter, which union again is more perfect than when one thing is in another accidentally. It follows, therefore, that God is whatever he has. Again, substance is not dependent upon accident, although accident depends on substance. Now that which is not dependent upon another can sometimes be found without it. Therefore, some substance can be found without an accident, and this seemingly is most becoming to a supremely simple substance, such as the divine substance. Therefore, the divine substance is altogether without accidents. The Catholic Tractarians are also in agreement with this statement, wherefore Augustine says, in his On the Trinity, that there is no accident in God. Having established this truth, we are able to refute certain erroneous statements in the Law of the Saracens to the effect that the divine essence has certain forms added thereto. Chapter 24. That the divine being cannot be specified by the addition of any substantial difference. Again, from what we have said above, it can be shown that we cannot add anything to the divine being so as to specify it by an essential specification, as a genus is specified by differences. For it is impossible that a thing be in act unless there be also all those things whereby its substantial being is specified. For an animal cannot be in act unless it be either a rational or an irrational animal. Wherefore also the Platonists who postulated ideas did not postulate per se existing ideas of genera, which derive specification from essential differences, but they postulated per se existing ideas of the species alone, which need not to be specified by essential differences. If then the divine being can receive an essential specification from something added to it, that being will not be an act without something added to it. But God's very being is his substance as shown above. Therefore, the divine substance cannot be an act without some addition, the contrary of which has been shown above. Again, whatever needs something added to it in order to exist is in potentiality to that thing. But the divine substance is not in potentiality in any way as proved above, and God's substance is his being. Therefore, his being cannot receive essential specification from something added to it. Moreover, whatever makes a thing to be an act and is intrinsic to that thing is either the whole essence thereof or part of its essence. Now, that which specifies a thing by an essential specification makes a thing to be an act and is intrinsic to the thing specified. Otherwise, the latter could not be specified essentially thereby. Therefore, it must be either the very essence or part of the essence of that thing. But if something be added to the divine being, it cannot be the whole essence of God, for it has already been proved that God's existence is not distinct from his essence. Therefore it follows that it is a part of the divine essence, and thus God would be composed of essential parts, the contrary of which was proved above. Again, that which is added to a thing by way of essential specification does not constitute the notion of that thing, but only makes it to be an act. For rational, added to animal, makes animal to be an act, but does not constitute the notion of an animal as such, because the difference does not enter into the definition of the genus. Now, if something be added to God to specify him with an essential specification, it must give that to which it is added the notion of its proper quiddity or nature, since what is added thus gives the thing actual being. Now this, namely actual being, is the divine essence itself, as shown above. It follows, therefore, that nothing can be added to the divine being to give it an essential specification, as a difference specifies a genus. Chapter 25. That God is not in any genus. Hence it follows of necessity that God is not in any genus. For whatever is in a genus has in itself something whereby its generic nature is specified, for nothing is in a genus without being in some one of its species. But in God this is impossible, as shown above. Therefore it is impossible that God be in any genus. Moreover, if God be in a genus, he is either in the genus of accident or in that of substance. He is not in the genus of accident, for an accident cannot be the first being and first cause. Nor can he be in the genus of substance, for substance that is a genus is not being itself, otherwise every substance would be its own being, and thus would not be caused by something else, which is impossible, as is clear from what we have said above. Now God is being itself, therefore he is not in any genus. Again, whatever is in a genus differs as to being from the other things contained in the same genus. Otherwise a genus would not be predicated of several things. Now all things that are contained in one same genus must agree in the whatness of the genus, because the genus is predicated of all in respect of what a thing is. Therefore the being of anything contained in a genus is beside the whatness of the genus. But this is impossible in God. Therefore God is not in a genus. Further, a thing is placed in a genus by the nature of its whatness, for genus is predicated of what a thing is. But the whatness of God is his very being. Now a thing is not placed in a genus according to its being, because then being would be a genus signifying being itself. It remains therefore that God is not in a genus. That being cannot be a genus is proved by the philosopher as follows. If being were a genus, it would be necessary to find a difference in order to contract it to a species. Now no difference participates in the genus, so that, to wit, the genus be contained in the notion of the difference, for thus the genus would be placed twice in the definition of the species. But the difference must be something besides that which is contained in the notion of the genus. Now, there can be nothing besides that which is understood by being, if being belonged to the notion of those things of which it is predicated. And thus, by no difference can being be contracted. It remains, therefore, that being is not a genus, wherefore it follows of necessity that God is not in a genus. Wherefore it is likewise evident that God cannot be defined, since every definition is composed of genus and difference. It is also clear that no demonstration is possible in regard to him, because the principle of a demonstration is the definition of that about which the demonstration is made. Someone, however, might think that, although the name of substance cannot properly be applied to God, because God does not subsist under, substat, accidents, yet the thing signified by that term is applicable to him, and consequently he is in the genus substance. For substance is a per se being, and it is clear that this can be applied to God from the fact that it has been proved that he is not an accident. But to this we reply, according to what has been said, that per se being is not in the definition of substance. For from the fact that it is described as a being, it cannot be a genus, since it has already been proved that being has not the conditions of a genus. And again from the fact that it is described as being per se, for this would seem to denote nothing else than a negation, since it is said to be a per se being through not being in another, which is a pure negation. And this cannot satisfy the conditions of a genus, for then a genus would not express what a thing is, but what it is not. Therefore we must understand the definition of substance in this way, that a substance is a thing to which it is fitting not to be in a subject, the word thing being taken from its quiddity, just as being is from existence, so that the meaning of substance is that it has a quiddity to which it is fitting to exist not in another. Now this does not apply to God, for he has no quiddity besides his existence. Hence it follows that he is nowise in the genus of substance, and consequently that he is in no genus, since it has been proved that he is not in the genus of accident. Chapter 26. That God is not the formal being of all things. From the foregoing, we are able to refute the error of some who have asserted that God is nothing else than the formal being of everything. For this being is divided into substantial and accidental being. Now the divine being is neither the being of a substance, nor the being of an accident, as shown above. Therefore, it is impossible for God to be the being whereby everything is formally. Again, things are not distinct from one another in that they have being, since in this they all agree. If then things differ from one another, it follows that either being itself is specified by certain differences added thereto, so that different things have a specifically different being, or that things differ in that being itself is attached to specifically different natures. But the former of these is impossible, because an addition cannot be attached to being in the same way as a difference is added to a genus, as already stated. It remains, therefore, that things differ because they have different natures, to which being is attached in different ways. Now the divine being is not what is attached to another nature, but is the nature itself, as shown above. If, therefore, the divine being were the formal being of all things, it would follow that all things are simply one. Moreover, the principle is naturally prior to that which flows from it. Now in certain things, being has something by way of principle, since the form is said to be the principle of being. And in like manner, the agent which gives certain things actual being. Therefore, If the divine being is the being of each thing, it will follow that God, who is his own being, has a cause, and thus is not per se necessary being, the contrary of which has been shown above. Further, that which is common to many is not something besides those many, except only logically. Thus, animal is not something besides Socrates and Plato, and other animals except as considered by the mind, which apprehends the form of animal as divested of all that specifies, and individualizes it. For man is that which is truly an animal, else it would follow that in Socrates and Plato there are several animals, namely animal in general, man in general, and Plato himself. Much less, therefore, being itself in general is something apart from all things that have being, except only as apprehended by the mind. If therefore God is being in general, he will not be an individual thing except only as apprehended in the mind. Now it has been shown above that God is something not merely in the intellect, but in reality. Therefore God is not the common being of all. Again, generation is essentially the way to being, and corruption the way to not being. For the term of generation is the form, and that of corruption privation, for no other reason than because the form makes a thing to be, and corruption makes a thing not to be. For supposing a certain form not to give being, that which received that form would not be said to be generated. If then God were the formal being of all things, it would follow that he is the term of generation, which is false, since he is eternal, as we have shown above. Moreover, it would follow that the being of everything has being from eternity, wherefore there would be neither generation nor corruption. For if there were, it would follow that a thing acquires anew a being already pre-existing. Either then it is acquired by something already existing, or else by something nowise pre-existing. In the first case, since according to the above supposition all existing things have the same being, it would follow that the thing which is said to be generated receives not a new being, but a new mode of being, and therefore is not generated, but altered. If, on the other hand, the thing nowise existed before, it would follow that it is made out of nothing, and this is contrary to the essence of generation. Consequently, this supposition would wholly do away with generation and corruption, and therefore it is clear that it is impossible. Moreover, the sacred doctrine refutes this error by confessing that God is high and elevated, according to Isaiah 6:1, and that he is over all things, according to Romans 9:5. For if he were the being of all, he would be something in all and not above all. Those who erred thus are condemned by the same sentence as idolaters who gave the incommunicable name, that is, of God, to wood and stones, as stated in Wisdom 14:21. For if God is the being of all, it would be no truer to say, a stone is a being, than to say, a stone is God. Now there are four things which apparently fostered this error. The first was a wrong understanding of certain authorities, for they found Dionysius saying, in the Celestial Hierarchy, Book 4, the being of all is the super-essential Godhead, and from this they wished to conclude that God is the formal being of all things, not perceiving that this meaning is irreconcilable with the words. For if the Godhead were the formal being of all, it would not be above all, but in the midst of all, in fact, something of all. Wherefore, when he said that the Godhead is above all, he declares it to be by its nature distinct from all and placed above all. And by saying that the Godhead is the being of all, he declares that all things derive from God a likeness to the divine being. Moreover, he elsewhere expressly proscribes the wrong interpretation in On the Divine Names 2, where he declares that there can be no contact with God, nor mingling of him with other things as of point with line or of the shape of the seal on wax. The second cause of this error was defective reason. For since that which is common is specified or individualized by addition, they deemed the divine being, to which nothing is added, not to be some proper being, but the common being of all, not perceiving that the common or universal cannot be without some addition, though it be considered apart from any addition. For animal cannot be apart from the difference of rational or irrational, although we think of it apart from these differences. Moreover, although we think of the universal without an addition, we do not think of it apart from its receptivity of addition. For if no difference could be added to animal, it would not be a genus, and the same applies to all other names of things. Now the divine being is without addition, not only in thought but also in reality. And not only is it without addition, but also without receptivity of addition. Wherefore, from the very fact that it neither receives nor can receive addition, we should conclude rather that God is not common but proper being, since his being is distinct from all others for the very reason that nothing can be added to it. Hence the commentator says in De Causis that the first cause, by reason of the very purity of its goodness, is distinct from others and, so to speak, individualized. The third cause of this error is the consideration of the divine simplicity. For since God is the extreme of simplicity, they thought that if we make an analysis of all that is in us, the last thing, being the most simple, must be God, for we cannot proceed indefinitely in the composition of the things that are in us. In this again their reason was lacking, that they failed to observe that what is most simple in us is not so much a complete thing as some part of a thing, whereas simplicity is ascribed to God as to a perfect subsistent being. The fourth thing that might lead them into this error is the expression whereby we say that God is in all things. For they fail to perceive that he is in things not as part thereof, but as the cause of things, which is nowise wanting to its effect. For we do not say that the form is in the body in the same sense as we say that the sailor is in the boat. Chapter 27. That God is not the form of a body. Accordingly, having shown that God is not the being of all, it can be proved in like manner that God is not the form of anything. For the divine being cannot be the being of a quiddity that is not its own being, as shown above. Now that which is the divine being itself is no other than God. Therefore, it is impossible for God to be the form of any other thing. Further, the form of a body is not its very being, but the principle of its being. But God is being itself. Therefore, God is not the form of a body. Again, the union of form and matter results in a composite, and this is a whole in respect of form and matter. Now the parts are in potentiality with respect to the whole, but in God there is no potentiality. Therefore, it is impossible for God to be the form united to anything. Again, that which has being per se is more excellent than what has being in another. Now every form of a body has being in another. Since then God is the most excellent being, as the first cause of being, he cannot be the form of anything. Moreover, This can also be proved from the eternity of movement as follows. If God were the form of a movable thing, since he is the first mover, the composite will be its own mover. But that which moves itself can be moved and not moved. Therefore, it is in it to be either. Now, a thing of this kind has not of itself indefectibility of movement. Therefore, above that which moves itself, we must place something else as first mover, which confers on it perpetuity of movement. And thus God, who is the first mover, is not the form of a body that moves itself. This argument avails for those who hold the eternity of movement. Yet if this be not granted, the same conclusion may be drawn from the regularity of the heavenly movement. For just as that which moves itself can both be at rest and be moved, so can it be moved with greater or less velocity. Wherefore, the necessity of uniformity in the heavenly movement depends on some higher principle that is altogether immovable, and that is not the part, through being the form, of a body which moves itself. The authority of Scripture is in agreement with this truth. For it is written in the Psalm, "Thy magnificence is elevated above the heavens." And in Job 11, verses 8 and 9, "He is higher than heaven, and what wilt thou do? The measure of him is longer than the earth, and deeper than the sea." Hence we are able to refute the error of the pagans who asserted that God was the soul of the heaven, or even the soul of the whole world, which led them to defend the idolatrous doctrine whereby they said that the whole world was God, not in reference to the body, but to the soul, even as man is said to be wise in reference not to his body, but to his soul. Which being supposed, they deemed it to follow that divine worship is not unduly shown to the world and its parts. The commentator also says, in Metaphysics 11, that this occasioned the error of the Zabian people, that is, of idolaters, because to wit, they asserted that God was the soul of the heaven. Chapter 28, of the Divine Perfection. Now, although things that exist and live are more perfect than those which only exist, yet God, who is not distinct from his own existence, is universally perfect being. And by universally perfect, I mean that he lacks not the excellence of any genus. For every excellence of any being whatsoever is ascribed to a thing in respect of its being, since no excellence would accrue to man from his wisdom, unless thereby he were wise, and so on. Wherefore, according as a thing has being, so is its mode of excellence. Since a thing, according as its being is contracted to some special mode of excellence, more or less great, is said to be more or less excellent. Hence, if there be a thing to which the whole possibility of being belongs, no excellence that belongs to anything can be lacking thereto. Now to a thing which is its own being, being belongs according to the whole possibility of being. Thus, if there were a separate whiteness, nothing of the whole possibility of whiteness could be wanting to it, because something of the possibility of whiteness is lacking to a particular white thing through a defect in the recipient of whiteness, which receives it according to its mode and, maybe, not according to the whole possibility of whiteness. Therefore God, who is his own being, as shown above, has being according to the whole possibility of being itself, and consequently, he cannot lack any excellence that belongs to anything. And just as every excellence and perfection is in a thing according as that thing is, so every defect is in a thing according as that thing in some sense is not. Now just as God has being wholly, so is not being wholly absent from him, since according as a thing has being, it fails in not being. Therefore, all defect is removed from God, and consequently, he is universally perfect. But those things which only exist are imperfect, not on account of an imperfection in absolute being itself, for they have not being according to its whole possibility, but because they participate being in a particular and most imperfect way. Again, every imperfect thing must needs be preceded by some perfect thing, for seed is from some animal or plant. Wherefore, the first being must be supremely perfect. Now, it has been shown that God is the first being. Therefore, he is supremely perfect. Moreover, a thing is perfect insofar as it is in act, and imperfect insofar as it is in potentiality and void of act. Wherefore, that which is nowise in potentiality, but is pure act, must needs be most perfect. Now such is God. Therefore, he is most perfect. Further, nothing acts except according as it is in act, wherefore action follows upon the mode of actuality in the agent. And consequently, it is impossible for the effect that results from an action to have a more excellent actuality than that of the agent, although it is possible for the actuality of the effect to be more imperfect than that of the active cause, since action may be weakened on the part of that in which it terminates. Now in the genus of efficient cause, we come at length to the one cause which is called God, as explained above, from whom all things proceed, as we shall show in the sequel. Wherefore it follows that whatever is actual in any other thing is found in God much more eminently than in that thing, and not conversely. Therefore, God is most perfect. Again, in every genus there is something most perfect relatively to that genus, by which everything in that genus is measured, since everything is shown to be more or less perfect according as it approaches more or less to the measure of that genus. Thus white is said to be the measure in all colors, and the virtuous among all men. Now the measure of all beings can be none other than God, who is his own being. Therefore no perfection that belongs to anything is lacking to him, otherwise he would not be the universal measure of all. Hence it is that when Moses sought to see the face of God, the Lord answered him, "I will show thee all good," confer Exodus 33 verses 18 and 19, giving thus to understand that the fullness of all good is in him. And Dionysius says in On the Divine Names 5, God exists not in any single mode, but embraces and prepossesses all being within himself, absolutely and without limit. It must, however, be observed that perfection cannot fittingly be ascribed to God if we consider the meaning of the word in respect of its derivation, since what is not made cannot seemingly be described as perfect. Yet since whatever is made has been brought from potentiality to act, and from not being to being, when it was made, it is rightly described as perfect, that is, completely made, when its potentiality is completely reduced to act, so that it retains nothing of not being and has complete being. Accordingly, by a kind of extension of the term, perfect is applied not only to that which has arrived at complete act through being made, but also to that to which is complete act without being made at all. It is thus that we say that God is perfect, according to Matthew 5, verse 48, "Be ye perfect, as also your heavenly Father is perfect." Chapter 29. Of the likeness of creatures. In sequence to the above, we may consider in what way it is possible to find in things a likeness to God, and in what way it is impossible. For effects that fall short of their causes do not agree with them in name and ratio, and yet there must needs be some likeness between them, because it is of the nature of action that a like agent should produce a like action, since everything acts according as it is in act. Wherefore the form of the effect is found in its transcendent cause somewhat, but in another way and another ratio, for which reason that cause is called equivocal. For the sun causes heat in lower bodies by acting according as it is in act, wherefore the heat generated by the sun must needs bear some likeness to the sun's active power, by which heat is caused in those lower bodies, and by reason of which the sun is said to be hot, albeit in a different ratio. And thus it is said to be somewhat like all those things on which it efficaciously produces its effects, and yet again it is unlike them all, insofar as these effects do not possess heat, and so forth, in the same way as they are found in the sun. Thus also God bestows all perfections on things, and in consequence he is both like and unlike all. Hence it is that Holy Writ sometimes recalls the likeness between him and his creatures, as when it is said in Genesis 1:26, "Let us make man to our image and likeness," while sometimes this likeness is denied, according to the words of Isaiah 40:18. "To whom then have you likened God, or what image will you make for him?" And of the Psalm, "O God, who shall be like to thee?" Dionysius is in agreement with this argument, for he says in On the Divine Names 9, "The same things are like and unlike to God, like according as they imitate him as far as they can, who is not perfectly imitable, unlike according as effects fall short of their causes." However, according to this likeness, it is more fitting to say that the creature is like God than vice versa. For one thing is like another when it possesses a quality or form thereof. Since then, what is in God perfectly is found in other things by way of an imperfect participation, that in which likeness is observed in gods simply but not in creatures. And thus the creature has what is God's, and therefore is rightly said to be like God. But it cannot be said in this way that God has what belongs to his creature. Wherefore, neither is it fitting to say that God is like his creature, as neither do we say that a man is like his portrait, although we declare that his portrait is like him. And much less properly can it be said that God is assimilated to the creature, for assimilation denotes movement towards similarity, and consequently applies to one that receives its similarity from another. But the creature receives from God its similarity to him, and not vice versa. Therefore, God is not assimilated to his creature, but rather vice versa. Chapter 30. What terms can be predicated of God? Again, in sequel to the above, we may consider what can and what cannot be said of God, also what is said of him alone, and what is said of him together with other beings. For since every perfection of creatures is to be found in God, albeit in another and more eminent way, whatever terms denote perfection absolutely, and without any defect whatever, are predicated of God and of other things, for instance, goodness, wisdom, and so forth. But any term that denotes such like perfections together with the mode proper to creatures cannot be said of God except by similitude and metaphor, whereby that which belongs to one thing is applied to another, as when a man is said to be a stone on account of the denseness of his intelligence. Such are all those terms employed to denote the species of a created thing, as man and stone. for its proper mode of perfection and being is due to each species. Likewise, whatever terms signify those properties of things that are caused by the proper principles of the species. Therefore, they cannot be said of God otherwise than metaphorically. But those which express these perfections together with the mode of supereminence in which they belong to God are said of God alone, for instance, the sovereign good, the first being, and the like. Now, I say that some of the aforesaid terms denote perfection without defect, as regards that which the term is employed to signify, for as regards the mode of signification every term is defective. For we express things by a term as we conceive them by the intellect, and our intellect, since its knowledge originates from the senses, does not surpass the mode which we find in sensible objects, wherein the form is distinct from the subject of the form on account of the composition of form and matter. Now in those things, the form is found to be simple indeed, but imperfect, as being non-subsistent, whereas the subject of the form is found to be subsistent, but not simple, nay more, with concretion. Wherefore, whatever our intellect signifies as subsistent, it signifies with concretion, and whatever it signifies as simple, it signifies it not as subsisting, but as qualifying. Accordingly, in every term employed by us, there is imperfection as regards the mode of signification, and imperfection is unbecoming to God, although the thing signified is becoming to God in some eminent way, as instanced in the term goodness or the good, for goodness signifies by way of non-subsistence, and the good signifies by way of concretion. In this respect, no term is becomingly applied to God, but only in respect of that which the term is employed to signify. Wherefore, as Dionysius teaches, such terms can be either affirmed or denied of God. Affirmed on account of the signification of the term, denied on account of the mode of signification. Now the mode of supereminence, in which the aforesaid perfections are found in God, cannot be expressed in terms employed by us, except either by negation, as when we say God is eternal or infinite, or by referring him to other things, as when we say that he is the first cause or the sovereign good. For we are able to grasp not what God is, but what he is not, and the relations of other things to him, as explained above. Chapter 31. That the divine perfection and the plurality of divine names are not inconsistent with the divine simplicity. From what has been said, we are also able to see that the divine perfection and the various names applied to God are not inconsistent with his simplicity. For we asserted that all the perfections to be found in other things are to be ascribed to God in the same way as effects are found in their equivocal causes, which causes are in their effects virtually, as heat is in the sun. Now this virtue, unless it were in some way of the genus of heat, the sun acting thereby would not generate its like. Wherefore, by reason of this virtue, the sun is said to be hot, not only because it causes heat, but because the virtue whereby it does this is something in conformity with heat. Now by the same virtue by which the sun causes heat, it causes also many other effects in lower bodies, such as dryness. And so heat and dryness, which are distinct qualities in fire, are ascribed to the sun in respect of the one virtue. And so too, the perfections of all things, which are becoming to other things in respect of various forms, must needs be ascribed to God in respect of his one virtue. And this virtue is not distinct from his essence, since nothing can be accidental to him, as we have proved. Accordingly, God is said to be wise, not only because he causes wisdom, but because insofar as we are wise, we imitate somewhat the virtue whereby he makes us wise. He is not, however, called a stone, although he made the stones, because by the term stone we understand a definite mode of being, in respect of which a stone differs from God. But a stone imitates God as its cause, in respect of being, goodness, and so forth, even as other creatures do. The like of this may be found in human cognitive powers and operative virtues. For the intellect, by its one virtue, knows all that the sensitive faculty apprehends by various powers, and many other things besides. Again, the intellect, the higher it is, the more things it is able to know by means of one, while an inferior intellect can arrive at the knowledge of those things only by means of many. Again, the royal power extends to all those things to which the various subordinate powers are directed. And so too, God by his one simple being possesses all manner of perfections, which in a much lower degree other things attain by certain various means. Whence it is clear how it is necessary to give several names to God. For since we cannot know him naturally except by reaching him from his effects, it follows that the terms by which we denote his perfection must be diverse, as also are the perfections which we find in things. If, however, we were able to understand his very essence as it is, and to give him a proper name, we should express him by one name only. And this is promised in the last chapter of Zacharias, to those who will see him in his essence. In that day there shall be one Lord, and his name shall be one. Chapter 32. That nothing is predicated univocally of God and other things. From the above it is clear that nothing can be predicated univocally of God and other things. For an effect which does not receive the same form specifically as that whereby the agent acts, cannot receive in a univocal sense the name derived from that form. For the sun and the heat generated from the sun are not called hot univocally. Now the forms of things whereof God is cause do not attain to the species of the divine virtue, since they receive severally and particularly that which is in God simply and universally. It is evident, therefore, that nothing can be said univocally of God and other things. Further, if an effect attain to the species of its cause, the name of the latter will not be predicated of it univocally, unless it receive the same specific form according to the same mode of being. For house in art is not univocally the same as house in matter, since the form of the house has an unlike being in the one case and in the other. Now other things, even though they should receive entirely the same form, do not receive it according to the same mode of being, because there is nothing in God that is not the divine being itself, as shown above, which does not apply to other things. Therefore, it is impossible for anything to be predicated univocally of God and other things. Moreover, whatever is predicated of several things univocally is either genus or species or difference or proper accident. Now nothing is predicated of God as genus or as difference, as we have proved above, and consequently neither as definition nor as species, which consists of genus and difference. Nor can anything be accidental to him, as was shown above, and consequently nothing is predicated of God either as accident or as proper, for the proper is a kind of accident. It follows, therefore, that nothing is predicated of God and other things univocally. Again, that which is predicated univocally of several things is more simple than either of them, at least in our way of understanding. Now nothing can be more simple than God, either in reality or in our way of understanding. Therefore nothing is predicated univocally of God and other things. Further, whatever is predicated univocally of several things belongs by participation to each of the things of which it is predicated. For the species is said to participate the genus, and the individual the species. But nothing is said of God by participation, since whatever is participated is confined to the mode of a participated thing, and thus is possessed partially, and not according to every mode of perfection. It follows, therefore, that nothing is predicated univocally of God and other things. Again, that which is predicated of several things according to priority and posteriority is certainly not predicated of them univocally, since that which comes first is included in the definition of what follows. For instance, substance in the definition of accident considered as a being. If, therefore, we were to say being univocally of substance and accident, it would follow that substance also should enter into the definition of being as predicated of substance, which is clearly impossible. Now nothing is predicated in the same order of God and other things, but according to priority and posteriority, since all predicates of God are essential, for he is called being because he is very essence, and good because he is goodness itself. Whereas predicates are applied to others by participation. Thus Socrates is said to be a man, not as though he were humanity itself, but as a subject of humanity. Therefore, it is impossible for anything to be predicated univocally of God and other things. Chapter 33. That not all terms applied to God and creatures are purely equivocal. It is also clear from what has been said that things predicated of God and other things are not all purely equivocations, as are the effects of an equivocal cause. For in the effects of an equivocal cause, we find no mutual order or relationship, and it is altogether accidental that the same name is applied to various things. Since the name applied to one does not signify that thing to have any relationship to another. Wherefore, it is not so with the terms applied to God and creatures. For in employing these common terms we consider the order of cause and effect, as is clear from what we have said. Therefore, certain things predicated of God and other things are not pure equivocations. Moreover, where there is pure equivocation, we observe no likeness of things, but merely sameness of name. Now there is some kind of likeness of things to God, as shown above. Therefore it follows that they are not said of God by pure equivocation. Again, when one thing is predicated of several by pure equivocation, we cannot be led from one to the knowledge of the other, for the knowledge of things depends not on words, but on the meaning of names. Now we come to the knowledge of things divine from our observation of other things, as shown above. Therefore the like are not pure equivocations when said of God and other things. Further, the use of equivocal terms breaks the continuity of an argument. Therefore, if nothing were said of God and creatures except by pure equivocation, no argument could be made by proceeding to God from creatures, whereas the contrary is evidenced by all who speak of divine things. Moreover, it is useless to predicate a name of a thing unless by that name we understand something about that thing. Now, if names are predicated altogether equivocally of God and creatures, we understand nothing of God by those names, since the meanings of those names are known to us only as applied to creatures. It would therefore be to no purpose to prove about God that God is being, good, or anything else of the kind. If, however, it be asserted that by such like terms we only know of God what he is not, so that, to wit, he be called living, because he is not in the genus of inanimate beings, and so forth, it follows at least that living, when said of God and creatures, agrees in the negation of inanimate being, and thus it will not be a pure equivocation. Chapter 34. That terms applied to God and creatures are employed analogically. It follows then, from what has been said, that those things which are said of God and other things are predicated neither univocally nor equivocally, but analogically, that is, according to an order or relation to some one thing. This happens in two ways. First, according as many things have a relation to some one thing. Thus, in relation to the one health, an animal is said to be healthy as its subject, medicine as effective thereof, food as preserving it, and urine as its sign. Secondly, according as order or relation of two things may be observed, not to some other thing, but to one of them. Thus being is said of substance and accident, insofar as accident bears a relation to substance, and not as though substance and accident were referred to a third thing. Accordingly, such names are not said of God and other things analogically in the first way, for it would be necessary to suppose something previous to God, but in the second way. Now, in this analogical predication, the relationship is sometimes found to be the same both as to the name and as to the thing, and sometimes it is not the same. For the relationship of the name is consequent upon the relationship of knowledge, since the name is the sign of intellectual conception. Accordingly, when that which comes first in reality is found to be first also in knowledge, the same thing is found to be first both as to the meaning of the name and as to the nature of the thing. Thus substance is prior to accident both in nature, inasmuch as substance is the cause of accident, and in knowledge, inasmuch as substance is placed in the definition of accident. Wherefore being is said of substance previously to being said of accident, both in reality and according to the meaning of the word. On the other hand, when that which comes first according to nature comes afterwards according to knowledge, then, in analogical terms, there is not the same order according to the reality and according to the meaning of the name. Thus the healing power in health-giving, medicines, is naturally prior to health in the animal, as cause is prior to effect. Yet as we know this power through its effect, we name it from that effect. Hence it is that health-giving is first in the order of reality, and yet healthy is predicated of animal first according to the meaning of the term. Accordingly, since we arrive at the knowledge of God from other things, the reality of the names predicated of God and other things is first in God according to his mode, but the meaning of the name is in him afterwards. Wherefore, he is said to be named from his effects. Chapter 35. That the several names predicated of God are not synonymous. From what we have said, it is also proved that, although names predicated of God signify the same thing, they are not synonymous, because they do not convey the same meaning. For just as various things are by their various forms like one simple thing which is God, so our intellect, by its various conceptions, is somewhat like him, insofar as it is led to know him by the various perfections of creatures. Wherefore, our understanding is neither false nor vain in conceiving many things of one, because that simple divine being is such that certain things can be likened to him according to their manifold forms, as we have proved above. And according to its various conceptions, our intellect devises various names which it applies to God. Wherefore, since they are not applied with the same meaning, it is clear that they are not synonymous, although they signify a thing absolutely one. For the name has not the same meaning, since it denotes the concept of the intellect previously to the thing understood. Chapter 36. How our intellect forms a proposition about God. From this, it is moreover clear that our intellect does not vainly form propositions about a simple God by composition and division, although God is altogether simple. For although our intellect arrives at the knowledge of God by various conceptions as stated above, it understands that what corresponds to them all is absolutely one, because our intellect does not ascribe its mode of understanding to the things which it understands, even as neither does it ascribe immateriality to a stone, although it knows it immaterially. Consequently, it enunciates the unity of the thing by a verbal composition implying identity, when it says, God is good, or is goodness, so that if there be any diversity in the composition, it is referred to the understanding, and unity to the thing understood. Similarly, sometimes our intellect forms a proposition about God with an implication of diversity by inserting a preposition, as when we say, goodness is in God, because here we imply both a certain diversity that is befitting the understanding, and a certain unity which must be referred to the thing. Chapter 37. That God is good. The goodness of God may be concluded from his perfection which we have proved. For that by reason of which a thing is said to be good is its own virtue, since the virtue of anything is that which makes its subject good and renders its work good. Confer Second Book of Ethics, Chapter 6. Now virtue is a perfection, since we say that a thing is perfect when it attains its proper virtue, as stated in the 7th Book of Physics. Wherefore a thing is good from the fact of its being perfect. And consequently, everything desires its own perfection as its proper good. Now it has been proved that God is perfect, therefore he is good. Again, it has been proved above that there is an immovable first mover which is God. Now he moves as a mover absolutely immovable, and this moves as the object of desire. Wherefore God, since he is the first immovable mover, is the first object of desire. Now a thing is desired in two ways, either because it is good, or because it seems good. The former is that which is good, for the seeming good does not move per se, but according as it has some appearance of good, whereas the good moves per se. Therefore the first object of desire, which is God, is good. Further, the good is that which all things desire, which the philosopher quotes as very well said. Confer the First Book of Ethics, Chapter 1. Now all things desire to be in act according to their mode, which is evident from the fact that every thing, by its nature, shrinks from corruption. Wherefore the essential notion of the good is to be in act, and consequently, evil, which is opposed to good, results from the privation of act by potentiality, as the philosopher declares in the 9th Book of Metaphysics. Now God is a being in act and not in potentiality, as we have proved above. Therefore, he is truly good. Moreover, the bestowal of being and goodness proceeds from goodness. This is proved from the very nature of the good, and from the notion it conveys. For the good of a thing is naturally its act and perfection. Now a thing acts through being in act, and by acting it bestows being and goodness on other things. Wherefore, it is a sign of a thing's perfection that it is able to produce its like, as the philosopher declares in the 4th book of Meteorology. Again, the notion of the good is that it is something appetible, and this is an end. And the end moves the agent to act. Hence good is said to be diffusive of self and being. Now, this diffusion is becoming to God, for it has been shown above that he is the cause of being in other things, since he is the per se necessary being. Therefore, he is truly good. Wherefore it is said in the psalm, "How good is God to Israel, to them that are of a right heart." And in Lamentations 3:25, "The Lord is good to them that hope in him, to the soul that seeketh him." Chapter 38. That God is goodness itself. From the above, we are able to conclude that God is his own goodness. For to be in act is for everything its own good. Now God is not only being in act, but is his own being, as proved above. Therefore, he is goodness itself, and not merely good. Further, the perfection of a thing is its goodness, as we have shown above. Now the perfection of the divine being does not consist in something added thereto, but in its being perfect in itself, as proved above. Therefore God's goodness is not something added to his essence, but his essence is his goodness. Again, any good that is not its own goodness is good by participation. Now that which is by participation presupposes something antecedent to itself, from which it derives the nature of goodness. But it is not possible to continue thus to infinity, since in final causes there is no proceeding to infinity, for the infinite is inconsistent with finality, and the good has the nature of an end. We must therefore come to some first good, that is good not by participation in relation to something else, but by its essence. Now this is God. Therefore God is his own goodness. Again, that which is can participate something, but being itself can participate nothing, because that which participates is potentiality, whereas being is act. Now God is being itself, as we have proved. Therefore he is good not by participation, but essentially. Moreover, in every simple thing, being and that which is are one. For if they be distinct, there is no longer simplicity. Now God is absolutely simple, as we have proved. Therefore, that he is good is not distinct from himself. Therefore, he is his own goodness. These same arguments show that nothing else is its own goodness. Hence it is said in Matthew 19:17, "None is good but God alone." Chapter 39. That no evil can be in God. Hence it is manifestly apparent that evil cannot be in God. For being and goodness and all essential predicates have nothing besides themselves added to them, although that which is, or the good, may have something besides being or goodness, since nothing hinders the subject of one perfection being the subject of another besides. Thus that which is a body may be white and sweet, while every nature is confined within the bounds of its essence, so that it admits of nothing extraneous within itself. Now God is goodness, and not merely good, as we have proved above. Therefore nothing that is not goodness can be in him, and consequently evil can nowise be in him. Moreover, as long as a thing remains, that which is contrary to its essence is altogether incompatible with that thing, Thus, irrationality or insensibility is incompatible with man unless he cease to be man. Now the divine essence is goodness itself, as we have proved. Therefore, evil, which is contrary to good, can have no place in God unless he cease to be God, which is impossible, since he is eternal, as was proved above. Again, since God is his own being, nothing can be said of him by participation, as is clear from the argument given above. If then evil were predicated of him, it would be a predicate not by participation, but by essence. But evil cannot be predicated of anything in such a way as to be the essence of that thing, for it would lack being, which is a good, as we have shown above. And in evil there can be no extraneous admixture, as neither can there be in goodness. Therefore, evil cannot be predicated of God. Again, evil is opposed to good. Now the notion of good consists in perfection, and therefore the notion of evil consists in imperfection. Now defect or imperfection cannot be in God, since he is universally perfect, as shown above. Therefore evil cannot be in God. Further, a thing is perfect according as it is in act. Therefore it will be imperfect according as it is deficient in act. Therefore evil is either privation or includes privation. Now the subject of privation is a potentiality, and this cannot be in God, and consequently neither can evil. Moreover, if good is what is desired by all, according to the first book of Ethics, chapter 1, it follows that evil as such is shunned by every nature. Now that which is in a thing against the mode of its natural appetite is violent and unnatural. Therefore evil in a thing is violent and unnatural insofar as it is an evil to that thing, although in composite things it may be natural thereto in respect of some part. But God is not composite, nor can anything be violent or unnatural in him, as shown above. Therefore evil cannot be in God. This is moreover confirmed by Holy Writ. For it is written in the canonical epistle of John, God is light, and in him there is no darkness. And in Job 34 verse 10, far from God be wickedness, and iniquity from the Almighty. Chapter 40. That God is the good of every good. It is also proved from the foregoing that God is the good of every good. For the goodness of a thing is its perfection, as we have stated. Now, since God is simply perfect, he contains in his perfection the perfections of all things, as we have shown. Therefore his goodness contains all goodnesses, and consequently he is the good of every good. Again, a thing is not said to have a quality by participation, except insofar as it bears some resemblance to that which is said to have that quality essentially. Thus iron is said to be fiery, insofar as it partakes of a resemblance to fire. Now God is good essentially, while all else is good by participation, as we have proved. Therefore nothing is said to be good except insofar as it bears some resemblance to the divine goodness. Therefore he is the good of every good. Further, since a thing is desirable for the sake of an end, and the aspect of good consists in its being desirable, it follows that a thing is said to be good, either because it is an end, or because it is directed to an end. Therefore the last end is that from which all things take the aspect of good. Now this is God, as we shall prove further on. Therefore God is the good of every good. Hence the Lord, in promising Moses that he should see him, said, in Exodus 33:19, "I will show thee all good." And it is said of divine wisdom, in Wisdom chapter 8, "All good things came to me together with her." Chapter 41. That God is the sovereign good. From this it is proved that God is the sovereign good. For the universal good stands far above any particular good, even as the good of the nation is greater than the good of an individual. First Book of Ethics, chapter 2. Since the goodness and perfection of the whole stand above the goodness and perfection of the part. Now the divine goodness of God is compared to all other things as the universal good to the particular, for he is the good of every good, as we have proved. Therefore, he is the sovereign good. Moreover, that which is predicated essentially is said more truly than that which is predicated by participation. Now God is good by his essence, and other things by participation, as shown above. Therefore, he is the sovereign good. Again, the greatest in any genus is the cause of others in that genus, as stated in Metaphysics, Book 1a, since the cause is greater than its effect. Now all other things derive their ratio of goodness from God, as we have shown. Therefore, he is the sovereign good. Moreover, just as that is more white, which has less admixture of black, so that is better, which has less admixture of evil. Now God is most of all unmixed with evil, since in him there can be no evil, neither in act nor in potentiality, and this becomes him by his very nature, as we have proved. Therefore, he is the sovereign good. Hence it is said in 1 Kings 2:2, "There is none holy as the Lord is." Chapter 42. That God is one. Having proved the foregoing, it is manifest that there is only one God. For it is impossible that there be two sovereign goods, since that which is ascribed to a thing by way of superabundance is to be found in one alone. Now God is the sovereign good, as we have shown. Therefore, God is one. Further, we have shown that God is absolutely perfect, and that he lacks no perfection. If then there be several gods, it follows that there are several such like perfect things, but that is impossible. For if none of them lacks any perfection, nor has any admixture of imperfection, which is required for anything to be simply perfect, there will be nothing by which they can be distinguished. Therefore it is impossible that there be several gods. Again, that which is sufficiently done, if it be supposed to be done by one, is better done by one than by many. Now the order of things is the best possible, since the potency of the first agent does not fail the potentiality of things for perfection. And all things are sufficiently perfected by referring them to one first principle. Therefore, a plurality of principles is inadmissible. Moreover, it is impossible for one continual and regular movement to proceed from several movers. For if they move together, none of them is a perfect mover, but altogether take the place of one perfect mover, which does not apply to the first mover, since the perfect precedes the imperfect. If, however, they move not together, each of them is at one time moving, and at another time not, whence it follows that the movement is neither continuous nor regular, because movement that is continuous and one is from one mover. Moreover, a mover that is not always moving is found to move irregularly, as evidenced by movers of lower degree, wherein violent movement is intense at first and slackens at the end, while natural movement is the reverse. On the other hand, the first movement is one and continuous, as was proved by the philosophers. Therefore, its first mover must needs be one. Again, corporeal substance is directed to spiritual substance as its good, for there is in the latter a fuller goodness to which corporeal substance seeks to be likened, since whatever exists desires to attain the greatest good as far as possible. Now all movements of the corporeal creature are found to be reduced to one first movement, beside which there is no other first movement not reducible to it. Therefore, beside the spiritual substance, which is the end of the first movement, there is no other that cannot be reduced to it. Now under this name we understand God. Therefore, there is only one God. Moreover, the mutual order of all diverse things that are directed to each other is on account of their order towards some one thing, even as the mutual order of the parts of an army is on account of the order of the whole army to the commander-in-chief. For that certain diverse things be united together in some relationship cannot result from their own natures as distinct from one another, because from this there would rather result distinction among them. Nor can it result from different causes of order, because these could not possibly of themselves, as differing from one another, have one order in view. Accordingly, either the mutual order of many is accidental, or it must be reduced to one first cause of that order, who sets all in order towards the end which he intends. Now all the parts of this world are observed to be ordered to one another, insofar as certain things are aided by certain others. Thus the lower bodies are moved by the higher, and the latter by incorporeal substances as shown above. Nor is this accidental, since it happens always or for the most part. Wherefore this world has but one director and governor. But there is no other world besides this. Therefore there is but one governor of the universe, and in him we call God. Again, if there be two things both of which are of necessity, they must needs agree in the intention of the necessity of being. It follows, therefore, that they must be differentiated by something added either to one or to the both of them, and consequently that either one is composite or both. Now no composite thing exists necessarily per se, as we have proved above. Therefore there cannot possibly be several things each of which exists necessarily, and consequently neither can there be several gods. Moreover, that in which they differ, on the supposition that they agree in the necessity of being, is either required as a complement in some way to this necessity of being, or is not required. If not, it follows that it is accidental, because whatever is added to a thing that has nothing to do with its being is an accident. Therefore this accident has a cause, and this cause is either the essence of that which exists of necessity, or something else. If it is its essence, since the very necessity of being is its essence, as shown above, the necessity of being will be the cause of that accident. But necessity of being is found in both. Therefore both have that accident, and consequently are not differentiated thereby. If, however, the cause of this accident be something else, it follows that unless this something else exist, this accident would not exist. And without this accident, there would not be the aforesaid distinction. Therefore, without that something else, these two things that are supposed to exist of necessity would be not two, but one. Therefore, the proper being of both is dependent on a third, and consequently, neither of them exists necessarily per se. If, on the other hand, that in which they differ be necessary as a complement to their necessity of being, this will be either because it is included in the notion of the necessity of being, as animate is included in the definition of animal, or because necessity of being as specified thereby as animal is completed by rational. In the first case, it follows that wherever there is necessity of being, there is that which is included in its notion. Thus, to whatever we can apply animal, we can apply animate. And thus, since we ascribe necessity of being to both the aforesaid, they cannot be differentiated thereby. In the second case, this is again impossible. For the difference that specifies a genus does not complete the generic idea, but the genus acquires thereby being in act, because the notion of animal is complete before the addition of rational, although animal cannot be in act except it be either rational or irrational. Now this is impossible for two reasons. First, because the quiddity of that which has being of necessity is its being, as we have proved above. Secondly, because thus necessary being would acquire being from something else, which is impossible. Therefore, it is impossible to have several things, each of which has necessary being per se. Further, if there be two gods, this word God is predicated of both either univocally or equivocally. If equivocally, this is beside the present question, for nothing prevents anything receiving an equivocal name if the usual mode of speech allow. If, however, it be predicated univocally, it must be said of both in the same sense, and thus it follows that in both there is the same nature in common. Either, therefore, this nature is in both according to the same being, or else it is in according to different beings. If according to one being, it follows that they are not two, but only one, for two things have not one being if they differ substantially. If, however, there is a different being in both, the quiddity of neither will be its own being. But we must admit this to be the case in God, as we have proved. Therefore neither of them is what we understand by the name of God, and consequently it is impossible to admit the existence of two gods. Again, none of the things that belong to a particular signet thing as such can possibly belong to another, because the singularity of a particular thing belongs to no other but the singular thing itself. Now its necessity of being belongs to that which is of necessity inasmuch as it is the signet thing. Therefore, it cannot possibly belong to any other thing, and thus it is impossible that there be several things, each of which exists of necessity. Therefore, it is impossible that there be several gods. Proof of the middle proposition: if that which is of necessity is not this signet thing as being of necessity, it follows that the designation of its being is not necessary in itself, but depends on something else. Now a thing according as it is in act is distinct from all else, and this is to be this signet thing. Therefore, that which is of necessity depends on something else for being in act, and this is contrary to the notion of that which is of necessity. Therefore, that which is of necessity must be of necessity according as it is this signet thing. Again, the nature signified by this word God is individualized either by itself, in this God, or by something else. If by something else, there must be composition therein. If by itself, it follows that it cannot be applied to another, for that which is the principle of individualization cannot be common to several. Therefore, it is impossible that there be several gods. Moreover, if there be several gods, it follows that the divine nature is not identically the same in each. Therefore, there must be something to distinguish the divine nature in this one and that one. But this is impossible, since the divine nature receives no addition whether of essential or of accidental differences as proved above. Nor is the divine nature the form of any matter, so as to be divided as the matter is divided. Therefore, there cannot possibly be several gods. Again, the being proper to each thing is but one. Now God is himself his very being, as shown above. Therefore, there can be but one God. Further, a thing has being according as it has unity. Wherefore everything shuns division so far as it can, lest it thus tend to not being. But the divine nature surpasses all in having being. Therefore, there is supreme unity therein. Therefore, it is nowise divided into several. Moreover, we observe that in every genus, multitude proceeds from some kind of unity. Wherefore in every genus we find one first thing, which is the measure of all things found in that genus. Hence whatever things we find agreeing in one point must proceed from some one principle. Now all things agree in the point of being, therefore that which is the principle of all things must needs be one only, and this is God. Again, in every government, he who presides desires unity, wherefore the chief form of government is a monarchy or kingdom. And of our many members there is one head, and this is an evident sign that unity is due to whom headship is becoming. Wherefore, we must confess that God, who is the cause of all, is simply one. We can moreover infer this confession of the divine unity from the sacred oracles. For it is said in Deuteronomy 6:4, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one." And in Exodus 20:3, "Thou shalt not have strange gods before me." And in Ephesians 4:5, "One Lord, one faith," etc. By this truth, the heathens who believe in many gods are refuted, and yet several of them affirmed the existence of one supreme God, by whom they asserted that the others whom they called gods were caused, for they ascribed the Godhead to all eternal substances, especially by reason of wisdom, felicity, and governance of the universe. This mode of expression is found even in Holy Writ, where holy angels or men or judges are called gods, as in the words of the psalm, "There is none among the gods like unto thee, O Lord." And again, "I have said, you are gods." And many like passages are found throughout Scripture. Wherefore the Manichees would seem yet more opposed to this truth, since they assert two first principles, the one of which is not the cause of the other. The Arians, too, impugned this truth by their errors, since they asserted that the Father and the Son are not one, but distinct gods, and yet were compelled by the authority of Scripture to confess that the Son is true God. Chapter 43. That God is infinite. Now while the infinite is a sequel of quantity, as philosophers teach, infinity cannot be ascribed to God in respect of multitude, seeing that it has been proved that there is but one God, and that there is no composition either of parts or of accidents in him. Nor may we say that he is infinite in respect of continuous quantity, since we have shown that he is incorporeal. It remains therefore to inquire whether infinity is becoming to him in respect of spiritual magnitude. This spiritual magnitude is referable to two things, namely to power and to the goodness or perfection of a thing's very nature. For a thing is said to be more or less white according to the degree of perfection in its whiteness, and the magnitude of power is gauged from the magnitude of deeds or of things made. Now in these things, the magnitude of one follows the magnitude of the other, because from the very fact that a thing is in act, it is active, and consequently, according to the degree in which it is perfected in its act, is the degree of magnitude in its power. Wherefore spiritual things are said to be great according to their degree of perfection. For Augustine says that, "In things which are great not by bulk, to be great is to be good." Accordingly, we have to show that God is infinite according to this kind of magnitude. Not, however, so that infinite be understood privatively, as in dimensive or numerical quantity. For a quantity of this kind is naturally finite, so that we speak of infinity by subtraction of that which it has by nature, and for this reason infinity in those quantities denotes imperfection. But in God, the infinite is understood only negatively, because there is no bound or end to his perfection, and he is the supremely perfect being. And it is thus that the infinite should be ascribed to God. For whatever is finite by its nature is confined to some generic notion. Now God is in no genus, and his perfection contains the perfections of all genera, as we have shown above. Therefore, he is infinite. Moreover, every act inherent to something else receives its limitation from that in which it is, since that which is in another is in it according to the mode of the recipient. Wherefore an act that exists in no subject has no limitations. For instance, if whiteness were per se existent, the perfection of whiteness therein would not be limited from having whatever it is possible to have of the perfection of whiteness. Now God is an act nowise existing in another, because neither is he form in matter, as we have proved, nor is his being inherent to any form or nature, since he is his own being, as we have shown above. Therefore it follows that he is infinite. Again, in things we find something that is pure potentiality, as primary matter, something that is pure act, namely God, as we have shown above, and something that is act and potentiality, namely other things. Now as potentiality, since it bears relation to an act, cannot exceed that act in any particular thing, so neither can it simply. Therefore, since primary matter is infinite in its potentiality, it follows that God, who is pure act, is infinite in his actuality. Again, an act is the more perfect according as it is less mingled with potentiality. Wherefore every act that has an admixture of potentiality has a limit to its perfection, while the act which has no admixture of potentiality has no limit to its perfection. Now God is pure act without any potentiality, as we have proved above. Therefore, he is infinite. Again, being itself, considered absolutely, is infinite, for it can be participated by an infinite number of things in an infinite number of ways. Hence, if we take a thing with finite being, this being must be limited by some other thing which is in some way the cause of that being. Now there can be no cause of God's being, since he is necessary of himself. Therefore he has infinite being, and himself is infinite. Moreover, whatever has a particular perfection is the more perfect according as it more fully participates in that perfection. Now there cannot be, nor even be imagined, a way in which a perfection is possessed more fully than by that which is perfect by its essence, and whose being is its goodness. And such is God. Therefore in no way can anything be imagined better or more perfect than God. Therefore, he is perfect in goodness. Further, our intellect reaches the infinite in understanding, a sign of which is that given any finite quantity, our intellect can imagine a greater. Now, it would be to no purpose for the intellect to be thus directed to the infinite unless there were infinite intelligible being. Therefore, there must be some infinite intelligible thing which must needs be the greatest of all beings, and this we call God. Therefore, God is infinite. Again, an effect cannot extend beyond its cause. Now our intellect cannot be but from God, who is the first cause of all things. Therefore our intellect cannot think of anything greater than God. If then it is possible to think of something greater than every finite thing, it follows that God is not finite. Moreover, infinite power cannot be in a finite essence, because everything acts by its form, which is either its essence or part thereof, and power denotes a principle of action. But God has not a finite active power, for he moves in infinite time, and this cannot be save from an infinite power, as we have shown above. Therefore it follows that God's essence is infinite. This argument, however, avails for those who hold to the eternity of the world, and if this be not supposed, our opinion about the infinity of the divine power is confirmed yet more. For every agent is the more powerful to act, according as it reduces to act a potentiality the further removed from act. Thus a greater power is needed to heat water than air. Now that which is not at all is infinitely distant from act, nor is it in any way in potentiality. Wherefore, if the world was made after previously not being at all, the Maker's power must needs be infinite. This argument, even for those who hold to the eternity of the world, avails to prove the infinity of the divine power. For they confess that God is the cause of the substance of the world, although they aver that it is eternal, since they say that the eternal God is the cause of an eternal world, in the same way as a foot would have been from eternity the cause of a footprint, if it had trod on the dust from eternity. Now this opinion being presupposed, it follows nonetheless from the argument stated above that the power of God is infinite. For whether he fashion things from time, as we hold, or from eternity, as they maintain, there cannot be in things anything that he has not produced, since he is the universal source of being, and so he produced them without any pre-existing matter or potentiality. Now active power must needs be in proportion to passive potentiality, because the greater the passive potentiality that is pre-existent or presupposed, the greater the active power which completes its actuality. Hence it follows, since a finite power produces an effect if we presuppose the potentiality of matter, that God's power, which presupposes no potentiality, is not finite but infinite, and that consequently his essence is infinite. Moreover, a thing lasts so much the longer as its cause is more efficacious. Consequently, a thing which is of infinite duration must have being through a cause of infinite efficacy. Now God is of infinite duration, for it has been shown above that he is eternal. Since then he has no cause of his being besides himself, it follows that he is infinite. The authority of Holy Writ bears witness to this truth, for the psalmist says, "Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and of his greatness there is no end." The same truth is attested by the statements of the oldest philosophers, since all of them, compelled as it were by truth itself, asserted that the first principle of things is infinite. For they knew not what they said, believing the infinity of the first principle to be after the manner of a discrete quantity, as Democritus maintained, asserting an infinite number of atoms to be the principles of things, and as Anaxagoras held, stating that the principles of things are an infinite number of similar parts. Or after the manner of continuous quantity, as those who held that some element, or some undefined infinite body, is the first principle of all. But since it was proved by the researches of subsequent philosophers that there is no infinite body, and if to this we add that the first principle must needs be infinite in some way, it follows that the infinite, which is the first principle, is neither a body nor a power residing in a body.